In this episode of Beyond the Frequency, I sit down with my longtime friend, Brad Lail, a decorated veteran, filmmaker, and host of the Awaken podcast. Brad is a seasoned podcaster, digital marketing expert, and proud conspiracy theorist with a passion for exploring the unknown. As a native South Carolinian and paranormal enthusiast, Brad brings his unique blend of curiosity and expertise to our conversation about the mind-bending Mandela Effect, shifting realities, and the mysteries of parallel universes. Join us for a laid-back, thought-provoking chat that blends supernatural theories with personal experiences as two friends reconnect over their shared curiosity for the strange and unexplained. Tune in as we dive into the weird, turn up the strange, and go beyond the frequency. Welcome to the first show, Beyond the Frequency. I'm your host, Cesar Pagan, and with me is my longtime buddy, Brad Lail. He is the host of his own podcast, the Awaken podcast. I'll let Brad tell you how to get a hold of him.
What's up, man? Thank you for having me on this. Dude, it's an honor to be on the first episode of your podcast, man. And I'm grateful for you coming on my podcast too, man. You lit up the world with your insight to the Anunnaki on my episode, man. And I got a lot of good feedback, man. People loving it. And like I said, dude, longtime friend, man. I love you like a brother. We go way back. And I'm excited for you, man. I'm excited for you to start this new show and this new journey.
Yeah, awesome, dude. But so today's episode is going to be talking just freely about the Mandela Effect. So first of all, let's just tell the audience if they don't know what the Mandela Effect is, let's just tell them what it is. So the Mandela Effect is a phenomenon where a large group of people remember an event or detail differently than how it actually occurred. It was actually named after Nelson Mandela because many people vividly recall that he had died in prison back in the 1980s, even though he actually passed away in 2013. This term was coined there was a journalist by name like Fiona Brune back in 2009, and she discovered that at a convention that others shared her false memory of when Mandela actually died, and then it just kind of blew up from there. Brad, how did you get introduced to the Mandela Effect? Like, where did you hear it?
Dude, it's funny, man, because this was before I started waking up, right? My show is called The Awaken Podcast. By the way, you can find me online at theawakenpodcast.com. If I didn't say that a while ago. But yeah, man, my show is about awakening. And it's funny because I remember a long time ago, someone told me, this is probably like 2012. It was like right after I got out of the military. And I'd moved back to South Carolina. I was working at a job. And I remember seeing something about like the movie Shazam is one of the biggest Mandela effects to me because it's like, Sinbad played a genie in the movie, and every kid, I'm 41, man, and every kid in our age like remembers that movie specifically. And it's funny because like when you watch interviews of Sinbad, and he's like, I've never done a movie like that. And I know people always say it existed. He said, but I'm telling you, I never did a movie like that. He's like, I would know because if I got paid for it, I would know if I was in the movie, which I think is like true, man. I think there really was a movie that existed. Anyways, man, I remember like back in 2012 talking about it with this girl at work, and I was like, you remember the movie Sinbad? And the movie Shazam, or was it Kazam? What was it? Shazam, right? It was Kazam.
Shazam.
I can't remember. I think it was Kazam.
Oh, Shazam, we're thinking about the current movie
Maybe
Shazam.
so, yeah. But anyways, I asked her about it, and she's like, yeah. I said, you remember Sinbad being a genie, right, in the movie? And she's like, yeah, of course. And I'm like, yeah, I do too, but apparently it never existed. This was like 12 years ago. So it was like, it was people were talking about that kind of stuff, but it was kind of like, yeah, but we just probably misremembered. And then like the older you get, the more you start seeing things that didn't really happened. Like Febreze is spelled with 2 E's or 3 E's or some shit. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's trippy, dude. It's like, I saw one with this Danielle Steele, the author Danielle Steele. She's a famous novelist who wrote like, women's smut novels. You know what I mean? It was like, he caressed her bosom and stuff like that, that kind of book. But her name, her last name, everybody remembers it as Stee. So there's an E at the end of Steele. But,
Okay.
according to modern day times, it's actually just regular Steel. And it's like, no, that's definitely another one, dude, was like, was Publishers Clearinghouse. I remember as a kid, I watched TV like nonstop, dude. And like
Yeah.
Ed McMahon was like would go around with a giant check and knock on doors when people won Publishers Clearinghouse, and he would give them a big check.
And balloons.
Yeah, and balloons. Yeah, and he would give them this check, man, and he would take pictures. It was a big deal. But
Yeah.
again, that was another thing that never existed. So it's like when you start discovering this stuff, like I remember being a kid and hearing, for example, that Nelson Mandela died in prison, right? And this was in the 80s, I believe. So it was like, I remember that specifically happening, but it always weirded me out. And I got to be honest, I think the Mandela effect was kind of one of those entryways into, okay, maybe something weird and different is going on here that maybe we're not aware of, And I read a list of these one night to my wife, who at the time was my girlfriend, and I was reading them to her and her mom, and they were both like agreeing with everything I was saying. Like, for example, Forrest Gump was like, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know which one you're going to get, right? That's how everybody remembers the saying, but it's not that. It's life was like a box of chocolates. You never know which one you're going to get. And it's like, when you hear shit like that, you're like, nah, that don't even make any sense, man. Like, because that's in the past tense. Life was like a box of chocolates. Why would he be talking about the past? Like,
I'll tell you what, we're going to go through a list of these things.
Yeah.
But before we get to those lists, how do you think that the Mandela effect started? Was there a cause? Did it just, people just start talking about it? Like, what have you heard?
So essentially, man, I think we could talk about all the different types of Mandela effects, and that stuff is really fun to talk about. But really, when you get down to the truth of it, what I think is happening, and for those who don't know, who've never seen the movie called The Shift, it's kind of a new movie that came out recently about a guy who shifts into a parallel universe, and he interacts with the devil, and the devil basically says, hey, every decision you've ever made in life, split decisions, seconds, minutes, whatever, shifts you into a different reality without you knowing it. And that's really what I truly think is going on. I think that when you make decisions in life, it shifts you into a different reality. So like at some point along the way, I decided, like for example, two of my best friends died in a car accident in 2004. And I was with these guys every single night. We rode around every single night together, man. We used to, like, I'd get off work. I used to paint cars, and I'd get off work and they'd come pick me up, and we'd just ride around all night drinking and smoking and hanging out. Or I'd go pick them up and we'd go ride around drinking and smoking. And we did this every night for like 2 years right after I got out of high school, right? And so so my thought on it is, there came a point where I decided I'm going to join the Air Force. I'm going to join the military and leave this town. That might have been my decision. That might have been my shifting into a new reality point, because from that moment on, my life changed dramatically, like drastically, for sure. And so, and it really is funny, because whenever I have conversations with my mom, she'll remember things that happened and I'll remember things that happened totally differently. And that happens more often than not, So sometimes I think I'm a new version of myself, that at some point I've made decisions along the way that has shifted me into this higher vibrational version of myself, or whatever you want to call it. I think there's tiers to us. We're in like pages of a book, you know what I mean? Where some people are on the first page, some people are on the 150th page. And I think I'm somewhere along the way, getting to the higher version of myself. And I think that happens with when you make decisions. And sometimes people can get stuck at these, different pages. They might get caught up in drinking too much or smoking weed or, whatever, or some kind of trauma that keeps them on a page, and they can't progress to that next page. But at some point, they're going to have to make that decision to split off and, go into a new reality where you can go. There's a book called Danny Do. It's a kid's book. And it's a book with two different outcomes. You choose one path or you answer one question and it takes you down to the end of the book and it's a different ending, right? So I think that's the same thing that happens with us. Like we make
Right.
these decisions and we fork, we split off. So we can either go the other path and start going down the opposite way. It's Jacob's ladder. You know the story of Jacob's ladder in the Bible where there's a ladder going from Jacob has a dream. He sees a ladder going from earth to heaven. And I think that's what it is. I think what Jacob saw in his dream or in his vision was in order to get to heaven, you gotta climb every step of the ladder individually to get up to heaven, right? And so that's just really how I see it, man. It's like Mandela effects are really cool because it's markers for you can't change your memory. You remember the book of Eli, where
Yeah.
Denzel Washington's character memorized
Yeah.
the Bible, right? And it's like you can't change someone's memory. You can change their current reality, but you can't change their memory. And so you can change every little thing you want, every little detail you want, but you can't take that memory away. And so that's why a lot of people read the Quran and memorize the Quran because they don't want it to change. They don't want people to try to fool them on what's changed, or if somebody tries to change the wording or something.
Oh, that's interesting. I think I had first heard about the Mandela effect also through just conversation, but as I looked into it back then, in 2008, CERN had turned on for the first time the Large Hadron Collider, and in that experiment, they opened a small portal, and they say that because of that small portal, and we're talking about like tiny, like nano size, but still big enough because it's all energy flowing through there. It doesn't matter how big the hole is. At that point, the Earth started to split, and that's why in '09 the conversation started happening with the whole Mandela effect. Didn't happen in '07, didn't happen in '06, didn't happen anything before that. But that's the thing about parallel worlds. They're so next to each other that the slightest change could be minute or it could be big, And the change doesn't always have to be locally. It could be right across, the water. It could be a freaking tree that used to be there and it's no longer there, and that's it. That's the only difference in that world. But like to your point, Brad, you said that when you make a decision, you shift over to whatever that vibrational parallel reality is and stuff. So that puts to question what happens to the other reality. Does that continue or does it stay? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it stays. I think there's different versions of ourselves. I believe they call it transurfing is the technical word for it, where it's like different versions of yourself in every different reality. And I know I'm talking a lot about movies and stuff, but there was another movie called Coherence. And if you haven't seen this movie, it's a mind bender, dude. It's wild, right? It's like,
Awesome. Yeah.
different realities, multiple realities happen at the same time. And it's funny because you start to see some of this stuff in movies now. And it's almost like they're trying to prepare us for something that's coming.
Yeah.
Like, for example, you watch the Marvel movies, right? You watch Spider-Man whenever Doctor Strange hits Spider-Man and his soul comes out of his body. I think it was into the multiverse or something like that, right?
You're right. That was it.
Yeah. So like that's really how it is.
Yeah, you're right. I do think that the old reality that you're no longer in now continue, and then from that one, another one splits, and from this one, another one splits, and then there's infinite possibilities. I look at the multiverse as like small like bubbles, and because our atoms are always vibrating, right? We seem like we're just still. Like if I do this, it seems like we're still, but we know that we're vibrating all the time. But where are they vibrating? They're vibrating in and out of different realities so fast. So in a sense, for every second, we are constantly shifting. Like the next sentence that I give you on this mic might shift me to a different reality. And then the next sentence after that, and so on and so forth. We're constantly shifting, And this is why when you go back to the concept of deja vu, parallel universes are so close to each other, like with membrane, that every now and then they kind of touch. And what you're doing is you're remembering something that another version of you has already done.
Yeah.
You're like, man, I could have swore I've been here. There's a lot of different possibilities for why a parallel universe exists, but it definitely is different.
Yeah. My brother and I went to a movie premiere of a movie called Tribal, and it's about it's a documentary of three guys veterans who served overseas, and they tell their stories of, some of the stuff they went through in actual combat. But then they also tell the stories of, losing friends to suicide and stuff like that after the military. So it's a really good movie for you guys to check out. It's on Amazon Prime Video, and a friend of my brother's is part of it, and he served with this guy as well. So, but we went to the premiere in Charleston, which I'm from South Carolina. So we went to the premiere in Charleston, South Carolina at the Citadel, and man, it was like my brother and I were just sitting there, and we didn't know three of the guys. We knew one of them very well, but we didn't know three of the guys sitting on the stage because they did a before and after, right? I mean, they did the film, and then they afterwards asked questions. But my brother and I, after the show, we were talking, and we were like, dude, those guys look so familiar to us. And, we both agreed that why did they look so familiar? It was weird, man. It was like, we'd never seen these, well, to our knowledge, we had never seen these guys before. They were all served, they all served around the same time as us, but we didn't, they were Army, and I believe they were all Army. No, one Marine. And we were Air Force, so it was totally different worlds. So the likelihood of us knowing them, it was pretty slim, except for the one guy that served with my brother. He was in the Air Force with him, he went to basic training with him and stuff. So we knew him, obviously. But yeah, it was like a recall. It was like, maybe did we go through this level before, and we just have regressed back? Have we fallen backwards a level, right? It's like a video game, or like in the military, you get demoted, right? It's like, you lose a stripe, or you lose a rank or whatever, man. That's kind of what it seems like. And it's like, did we know these guys at some point? And it was wild that me and my brother both had that same feeling, because typically he's like me a little bit, but not quite like us. Like he doesn't go deep with this stuff as much as we do. He probably does, and he just doesn't admit it. But
right. A lot of people do. A lot of people do that. Yeah.
But for him to admit it, it was a strange occurrence. It was like, that meant something to me. So, because he would never admit that to somebody like me. He'd be like, man, it's stupid shit, man. He's he's an older brother. You know how it is, man.
I love that. I think it's actually a very good time for us to go through a couple of these Mandela effects, and let's see what I'm gonna ask you, and then let's see what you remember. So let's see here. Let's go over the Berenstain Bears. Is it Berenstain or Berenstein?
Well, I mean, I remember it as with the EIN, but
me too.
Yeah, and it's Stain, ST.
Yeah. Go ahead.
STAIN, right? That's what
they say, right?
Yeah, the modern version.
Yeah, so I do agree. So we'll say that we both agree on this one then, right? We both remember it's Berenstain, not Berenstein. All right, one of my favorite ones was Looney Tunes, right? So Looney Tunes, the spelling of tunes with a U or tunes with two O's. What do you remember?
How I remember it is with the OONS.
The OONS?
Yeah. No. I'm saying UNES. That's because it was like, at the end it was like a melody. It's like dun, 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 dun. That's a tune, right? It's like, that's the way I thought of it.
So the way that I thought about it was actually with the O's, because they were cartoons. Like a tune is a cartoon. So these were like crazy cartoon characters. So that's what they're called, Looney Tunes. But I have seen with the U. I think U is right now the current one. So that with like music and stuff. So I didn't get that part and everything. Febreze was the one that you had mentioned earlier. And dude, when I first saw this one, you may have done the same thing. I went to look for my Febreze in my closet or something, and I looked at it, and I was like, holy shit, it's got one E. But I remember two E's.
Two E's, yeah. I used to take it to school. I used to take it to school and spray my book bag and stuff.
Yeah. Who spells breeze with one E? It just doesn't logically make sense. It doesn't
make sense, right? That's the whole thing. Most of these things don't make sense. It's like, I know you probably got the Jif one on your list, right? The Jiffy peanut butter one that's like, no, we remember Jiffy. And they're like, nah, it's just Jif. I'm like, it ain't never been no damn Jif. It's always been Jiffy on the
Jif, right?
Huh?
I said, what's Jif? What's just Jif?
Yeah, like it doesn't even make any sense. Like in the Jiffy is what you can make peanut butter sandwiches in a Jiffy. That was the whole point of the,
I remember that explanation because of that. Yeah. Okay. So what about now? One interesting is that song "We Are the Champions" by Queen. I mean, at the end, I always remember, I didn't know all the lyrics, but I knew the chorus. And I know at the end, it would be like, we are the champions. And they'll go,
My
of the
friend
world.
of the world. Yeah, yeah.
And that's it. And then it cuts. Well, nowadays is we are the champions. And then boom, that's it. No of the world. Like, of the
Yeah.
world just cut.
So it goes like this. We are the champions, bum bum bum, of the
Yes.
world. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. But now what's funny is that I've seen, people on like on YouTube and things like that that go back to their records or whatever players and they play it and they're like, no way. They're like, who touched my record? You know, like it's weird. Next one, the Monopoly Man, right? Monocle or no monocle?
Of course, that motherfucker had a monocle. He, of course, had a monocle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Bags, right?
yeah,
Do you have the Monopoly game at home?
yeah. I got it.
He has no monocle on yours, right?
No, no, I haven't even checked it. I really haven't checked it. No, but we have it. I just haven't looked at it because I'm like, I don't care what the hell they say. But
Yeah,
we might be confusing. See, I think about these things sometimes too. You remember the movie Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, right?
I do.
You remember he interacts with a guy who has a monocle, and he goes, "You must be the Monopoly guy." I don't know if you remember
Man.
that. It was like a little quick scene.
But like things like that, like what you mentioned, is what people use like as a stretch to try to like fill in, be like, well, maybe this is why, and you could be right because I could also be confusing it with the Peanuts guy.
Well, you could use the argument that Jim Carrey's character Ace Ventura, he called him the Monopoly guy. So obviously there was he had a monocle. He thought that the Monopoly guy had a monocle too. So like,
Yeah,
it's funny that
true.
you mentioned 2008 because it does seem like after that, because again, that was 2012 whenever I started. I actually started waking up around that time too. It wasn't until I got out of the military, but it was like a weird shift or something where I started waking
Yeah,
up and I started
yeah,
becoming more aware and present of everything of around me. So it was like maybe there was some sort of a shift that started to happen, a major shift, and we haven't fully gotten to the finish line of that shift. And when that
no, no,
shift finally
we're-
moves around, we're gonna figure out like the real crazy
yeah,
stuff that's been going on, dude.
yeah, we're still riding that wave. It's the first time that we in history, our history, that we've ever, opened up a portal. We're talking about two photons like at high velocity hitting each other, like
Right.
that tears up fabric and time. And then after that, boom, things started just going crazy and stuff.
Well,
Um,
but here's the thing. I don't think it's
yeah,
the first time we've opened portals. First of all, I think that
and that,
portals have been open. You can put uh, stones in a circle and do ritual chants and stuff, and that's where these Indian chants, these Native American chants, these all these religious chants come from. That's where the ohms come from. That's where all this stuff, because they were trying to vibrate something into a reality. They were probably trying to vibrate themselves into another reality, or they're probably trying to open some sort of a doorway. And also think
right.
that like women are portals themselves. I mean, you
Hmm.
think about it, babies come from them through like
Oh
they're
yeah,
they're plasma portals in a way. So like a lot of these things are exist already, but it does seem like that something was affected whenever they started, messing, trying to pretend to be God and start trying to create things that they shouldn't be trying to create. Everybody
yeah,
always, I'm not gonna lie, I want to do it too. I want to do DMT, I want to do ayahuasca, I want to try that crazy stuff. But to be honest with you, I always think about it. I'm like, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe that's the forbidden fruit that was talked about in the Bible. You can't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And
right,
maybe that's the rub of it is like, because that's what Eve did. She ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And what she did was she saw into a different reality. She saw into a different realm. And obviously Adam did too. She went and told Adam, you gotta try this. This is wild. So she probably ate some kind of DMT or some kind of mushrooms or something that took her to it on a wild ride. You know what I mean? But I think we got to be
yeah,
careful that, like we can't play God, dude. We're here for a reason. This reality exists for a reason. We're here to learn something. We're here to learn how to love. We're here to learn how to have experiences, and like we're all God experiencing himself, right? So it's like we're here to just experience and try to be good people and learn how to be the best versions of ourselves. So it's weird, man. You got to like, people have to be very careful when they're trying to play God, because God might get angry, because that's what happened in the flood story, right? Regardless of the book of Genesis, if you take it from the book of Genesis or if you get it from the Epic of Gilgamesh or whatever, it's still God's wrath raining down on the.
Yeah, somebody with great power made that happen.
Yes.
And I mean, one day we'll all find out who and how, right? But point is that somebody definitely higher than us, way powerful, like control the elements and whatnot. Yeah, that's call it God with a small G, but still God it is
Dude,
of sort.
I had this. We're talking about Mandela Effect. So again, we're
Yeah.
talking about different versions, right? Different realities, different versions. And I'll give you 2 quick stories if you don't mind. You reached out to me about this one because you saw a TikTok video, but like, dude, there's two guys that I reached out to since I left the military that don't remember me at all. And one of them, dude, I could tell you the story off air, and
Yeah.
it would be, if I told you the story, it would be something you would never forget. It's
I
like,
know him? No.
no, you don't know. They weren't. One of them was at McDill, but it was when I was at CENTCOM. And so the other one was like he was at tech school with me, basic training, and then tech school, and then we were at my first assignment in Turkey together. And so, dude, he picked me up from the airport. He was like my sponsor. You get a sponsor when you go to your first assignment and stuff, and they show you around. They welcome you to the place, and especially overseas, you get a sponsor typically. So he was my sponsor. We went on trips together when we were in Turkey, dude. We would go on these long trips for like 10-hour drives, just me and him. And we would stop. We would take pictures all along the way. So there's no way this guy can forget me. There's no way. And I called him up one day, and he's like, "Yeah, sorry, friend. I don't know, man. I don't know. The name doesn't ring a bell." And I listed all the places. I'm like, "We went here." And he's like, "Yeah, I remember going to those places, but I don't remember you." And I'm like, "That's crazy, dude." So, yeah, the other guy, it was a similar thing. I got this picture hanging on my wall of me at a Tampa Bay Rays game, because I'm a big Tampa Bay Rays fan. And this guy was he was there with me, and we were both getting sprayed with champagne, and we both made it in the picture, but he's not in that picture now. And so for me, that's a wild like thought too. Like maybe I shifted into a different reality, right? And it's like, but there was another dude. The matter of fact, last night I was talking to a guy on my show, and I was doing an episode with a guy named Arthur, and he was teaching me about lucid dreaming, and he was telling me that he's learned to meditate before he lucid dreams. And when he goes into these lucid dreams, he can control the narrative. And what he does is he actually fights off demons in this realm, in this dream world. And so he confronts these demons and he fights them off, right? So like he was addicted, right? He was addicted to all kind of drugs and alcohol and stuff like that. And he said one night he had a lucid dream where he was in this reality. He saw this like golem type character, like off of Lord of the Rings, and he was like all hunched over and stuff, and bald and like just scraggly looking, and he stuck his hand out and he had some like white powdery substance. And Arthur said he did it in the dream. He was like, "Okay, yeah, I'll try it." And he did the substance in the dream, and he said that thing got real upset. It left, whatever that thing was. He said he didn't see his face. He said he left, right? And so, but he was in this place by himself, and it was just, dark. It was just completely black. And he said he called out to the thing. He said, "No, come back here now." And the thing like, boom, popped right up in his face. It was like a scary, like popped right up in his face. And he said when he looked at him, it was him. It was a worn down version of him.
Yeah.
And so he told the thing, he said, "I release you. I release you. Go, leave me." And he said that ever since then, he hadn't had any problems with any kind of addiction and stuff like that. But again, was he accessing, remember I talked about Jacob's ladder. Was he accessing the version of him that was on the first page of that book, or the first rung of that ladder, right? Was he talking to that person and saying, no, I'm done with you, demon, get out of here? What if the demons are ourselves? You know what I'm saying?
So you think he was going into his dream and fighting off all of his demons, or trying to do his best to fight off as many demons of himself that he could? Is that what he was doing? And when he woke up, is he like released from these demons? Is he like a better person?
Yeah, essentially. And so he wrote an ebook, man, that I'm going to share on my website once the episode goes live.
Yeah.
And it's an ebook on how to lucid dream, and it gives you some tips on meditation before you go to sleep. And then, affirmations right before you go to sleep, like, "I will remember this dream." And then he teaches you ways to like to know that you're in a dream, right? He says,
Yeah,
look at your hand and you can see if your hand is like pixelated and stuff, then you're in the dream. And so
I remember that. I used to so I don't lucid dream as often as I used to and everything. I remember the first time that I lucid dreamed, and literally whatever I was dreaming about, as soon as I realized, the first thought that came to my mind in my dream was, wait a minute, I remember falling asleep. And as soon as I remembered that comment, everything went white. And I was like, wow. And then like what was weird was that I felt both of myself. I felt myself in my dream and I felt myself asleep. It was so weird. Like, and I was like, wow, is this the feeling of like, of how God senses everything like all at one time, and it
right.
felt normal and everything. And all of a sudden, everything went white. I'm just like, all right, let me just go to a place because I'm thinking about movies and stuff. And I thought about my old, like, my old school, like in second grade. And all of a sudden, it just came into my vision. And then I did two things where I was like, all right, let me really try this. And I said, let me think of a sword. I mean, literally a sword. That's what I thought about. And a sword showed up. And then the most stupidest thing, I was like, hamburger. I was literally thinking of like when you dream, when you ask for like a genie, whatever, a wish. It was so stupid, but it was proving my point of lucid dreaming. And somebody did tell me, I don't know if this guy has shared this with you, but somebody had told me that to wake yourself up is before you go to sleep, think of something kind of like not too outrageous, but outrageous enough to where you're like, okay, that's weird. And I always would think of a a blue orange, okay, a blue orange, because I used to have a basket of oranges, and every time I look at it every morning, if I saw that one was blue, I'm like, okay, now I'm dreaming. Or like looking at your watch. If you always look at your watch, look at your watch, and or something like that, and those things did help me out. But so what's one more other thing that he mentioned that he uses to like wake up in his dream? Do you remember?
Looking in mirrors, different things like, because, and he said mirrors will show that, try to find a mirror in your dream because it'll show if you look at yourself, your face will be like distorted or like you won't be able to see yourself. So it's all interesting because I think what happens when we dream is we we're like, when we're sleeping, we're like recharging our meat suit batteries, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
then we're kind of like, if you see an EV place where you can charge your electric vehicle, people are just kind of standing there, waiting for their vehicle to charge. I think that's what happens when we sleep. We kind of detach. We kind of get out of the meat suit car, and we just
Yeah.
kind
I
of
like.
fly around in the, in the astral plane, and we could probably see different levels and access different levels and things like that.
Yeah.
So when you talk about it in the vein of like, you know, we're talking about like levels, right? We're talking about ladders, we're talking about books, whatever analogy you want to look at.
Yeah.
Everything is everything. So like we're we're atoms, we're all made of atoms, and every atom is made of atoms, and every atom is made of atoms, and every atoms. And so there's infinite numbers, yes. And
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
infinite versions of ourselves in all of these different universes.
Yeah.
Because if you think about the universe, where the universe, the earth spinning around the sun and stuff like that, or the sun spinning around the earth or whatever it is, and like it all
Yeah.
looks like an atom if you zoom out, right?
Yeah. I
So
completely agree with what you're saying. And then everything also spirals. Everything in a lot of shapes, like we know that anything organic has a curve in it, right? Like show me something organic that has a straight line. Have you ever seen anything organic that has a straight line? It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist and everything. Now the only straight lines that do exist are the shapes that man has created, right? Triangles, square, rectangles, and stuff.
but even those like straight lines are made up of little curves,
Little curves,
right? Yeah,
exactly.
little
Yeah,
spirals, little fractals and stuff.
exactly. And then you were saying about how like pretty much from the higher it repeats always low. That's that whole concept of from the macro down to the micro, right? So I mean, shit, your parents had you, and then you have kids, and then they have kids, and and it's still a piece of the person or the thing before it. Everything continues to replicate, smaller than it grows, and smaller and grows, and things like that.
Fractals, there's fractals in everything. There's literally fractals that make up everything in this universe. Makes up every flower petal, every molecule, every drop of water, everything in the universe is made up of infinite fractals, just
Yeah.
continuously repeating itself. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
in that sense, the universe is expanding, you know.
Mhm.
But I don't think the universe is like the galaxy like we think necessarily. It's like this infinite, we're constantly expanding in different planes of existence kind of thing, right? I don't
Right.
even know, you think we can come up with words to describe that, whatever that
Yeah.
is, because that's dimensions that we don't even know. That's
We don't even
dimensions
know.
that we've never experienced and we can't possibly experience. So
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even think so. Like for the fact that we have the audacity to think that there's an edge to the galaxy, like people have said that and everything. Yeah. Like there's a middle ground and then there's like, the far edge of this place. Like why? It's just expansion, all the way. There is no end to it. That's why, again, infinite, right? It just keeps going.
that's what it is. I mean, you know, it's different versions of ourselves. That's it. That's
Yeah.
the only way I can put it. We're transurfing. We're on different pages of the book.
Yeah.
Again, there's a book, and everything is in that book, but you're in a different version of that book.
Yeah, like that. You know what? Then it's like I also explain to folks about like when it comes to frequency and like what frequency you're tuned into. I tell folks is like look at when watching TV. There's 1,000 channels, right? But you're only tuned into that one channel. You want to move on to the next channel, you switch it, right? That's switching your frequency and everything. So even though you're only able to see one channel, you know that the other channels are still playing at the same time and everything. So that's the multiverse, so to speak. If you have like the same character, the same actor who's in like 5 different movies playing at the same time on TV, you're like, okay, which one is the real version? They're all him.
Yeah, and when we get these intuitions, these intuitive feelings, and these gut feelings, you know what I mean? Like when you come to a decision in life and you go, man, that's why people say trust your gut. It's like when you get those feelings, that's actually higher versions of yourself
Talking to
trying to
you.
talk to yourself, your lower version saying, don't
I
do
agree.
it, right? It's like it's called retrocausality. Your higher version is going, hey man, you learned from that mistake a long time ago. Don't do that thing again. But
Right.
you still do it anyways. And
Right.
then it keeps you down in that level, that never ending cycle of, getting out. You're never going to get out of that trauma. You're never going to get out of that whatever state you're in, but you got to rise past that. So when you get those feelings, you should probably listen to it because I think it's your highest version of yourself, your higher versions of yourself trying to warn you and try to tell you. Because if just think about that. We're in the present right now.
Mm.
And I think in my mind all the time, if I could tell the past version of me not to sleep with that girl, or the past version of me not to start smoking cigarettes, or whatever the case is, you can actually hear yourself. You know what I mean? So like if you said it with enough emphasis and you focus your thoughts on it, you really could affect your past self. Like
Yeah.
it's true. It's called retrocausality. You can affect
Yeah.
your future self the same way. You could say, I will be, it's the same thing in the manifestation stuff. That's all that is like you're telling your future self that exists. I got to rise to that level. Like that version
Right.
of me exists, that handsome version, that muscled version, that skinny version, that whatever, that version with the hot wife, that version with the nice car, whatever, that version of
Yeah.
you exists. You just
That
haven't
is it.
got there to it. And so that's called retrocausality. Yeah.
I'm glad that you mentioned you mentioned about hearing yourself, and a lot of people have a hard time understanding, well, how do I hear myself? See, whenever we hear ourselves, we're always used to, the whole like just literally hearing ourselves and everything. But if our higher self is energy, then you gotta think, how does energy express itself? How would energy express itself to me in a dense world and everything? And I think it's feeling. It's like when you get this rush, this energy, when you're excited, when you're passionate about something, you're really at the height of that energy spike. So when they say follow your passion, because when you're at your highest state of energy, that means that's your higher self telling you this is what you need to be doing. And then when people don't follow their passion, or you can say they're not listening to their higher self, their energy starts going really low. They don't accomplish things. But when you follow your passion and you live in your passion, what happens? We all know you start doing much better. You start getting a whole lot more things. So I think the answer to that is when they say listen to yourself, just feel whatever it is that makes you feel passionate or excited about something, and that's your higher self talking to you.
Yeah, it might be your guardian angel, but I'm starting to think more that maybe it's myself. Maybe it's a future version of myself that's telling me,
You,
you know,
yeah.
like my son fell through this rotten trailer that was in my mom and dad's house, and I saw that happen before it happened, right?
Ooh, okay.
So everything that happens in this world has already happened, and we're just repeating it. I had a friend of mine that came on the show, or I don't remember if it was my show or his show, but we were talking about this, and he said that he was playing football or something. I can't remember what it was, and he lost consciousness, and his body separated. He had an out of body experience, and he separated from his body, but his body was still playing the game. He didn't
Wow.
pass out. He wasn't laying on the ground dehydrated from heat exhaustion or anything.
Playing the game.
His avatar was still playing the game. And so
Yeah.
what I'm saying by that is, like, maybe this is just like your soul can, like, jump into that avatar at any time, whatever level that is. So
Yeah. I've heard about that. I've heard where people see their avatar still going about their day, but then they can see themselves and they're
yeah,
like, wait a minute, why am I doing this, right? I think in those moments that we notice, that we hear those stories, it starts to tell us that our energy, our spirit, our soul can come and go whenever it wants, can come and go wherever it wants, go do whatever it needs to do. When it comes back to the avatar, we don't remember, we don't even notice. So it's interesting. It's like putting our meat suit on autopilot. Let it just do its thing, because our energy, our soul is just taking a ride. Taking a ride, it's experiencing it. We're the car. We're just riding along where we get to feel emotions, we get to eat food, we get to have sex, we get to drink, we get to, give birth and, celebrate all these different things that energy can't do. But then sometimes when energy needs to take a pause and go away, whether we're sleeping or a traumatic experience or something, it's going to go do it. And we don't even know. We don't even know. We may get moments where we're like, I zoned out. I was like daydreaming. Where did I go? We always do that, right? We always say, where did I go? Holy shit. You just went somewhere. You don't remember, but you felt that you went somewhere.
whenever I have whenever I do anything creative, I think that we're supposed to create in this world. I think that's what our goal is in this world, is to learn how to, or to be our most creative selves. That's what I really think we're supposed to be doing. And anytime I do anything creative, I do web design and stuff for a living, and photography and stuff. And when you're doing anything, like, and people who have written papers, it's kind of the same way. Once you start putting words on paper, things start flowing, and then all of a sudden you've got something there. Well, it's kind of like that with web design, or with any kind of creative graphic design or whatever. It's like you just start putting shapes on in your Photoshop or your Illustrator or whatever, and then next thing you know, you got this thing. And that's how it is when I do websites, man. And what happens sometimes, it's like I get this buzz that goes through my whole body. And I always try to describe this to people, and they think I'm crazy when I say it, obviously. But I'm like, you never got that buzz? That it's like not a drunk buzz. I'm talking about like a vibration buzz, like the whole body. It's almost as if somebody, like, let's just say, for example, I'm looking at a layout, and there's two shapes, there's two squares, and one square doesn't look quite right. And I keep looking at it, and I go, I gotta change this square. I gotta do something with it, but I don't know yet. And then I switch them, and then all of a sudden it looks perfect. And I go, and then that buzz, that vibration comes over my whole body. And to me, it feels like something that just takes their hand and runs it down my whole body, as if to say, yes, you did it. You got it. You figured that out. You figured that thing out.
Yeah.
And so, what's weird too is, like, I kind of get cross-eyed a little bit. It's like a brief, it's a jolt. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah. And you're right. I think based off what we were talking about, that's just your energy trying to talk to you, communicate with you. It's kind of like when you see those movies where the ghost leaves its body and it's trying to communicate with the mortals, whatever, and it tries to like really make its hands solid so you can grab a cup or something like that. I'm sure our higher self has so many different ways to communicate. I mean, I wonder if like I wonder what the version of that concept is in a video game. So we direct our avatar in the game to go into the right building or the right path to collect the right coins. I think every time that we play a video game, we always try to level up. Who wants to level down, right? We're always trying to level up and everything. So we're always going through, um, and even us as the programmers of this avatar, we don't know the game, right? It's a brand new game. It's a brand new experience, right? So from the time that we turned the power on the game, life was born. This character was created. From the time that we build a new character, now we're taking this character through this life, trying to get to the end of it. We don't know what the end of it, but we know there's an end of it. What if our higher self is playing us just like that, has no idea what to expect in this life, but has a better perspective than we do, where to go, what to do, what the cheat codes are, things like that. And then when the game's over, avatar's done, energy goes back, rinse and repeat, man.
Yeah, God's the creator of this game, right? It's like you have to, regardless of, any kind of religion, you have to at least admit there's a creator. I mean, we didn't just come from nothing. So it's like, I like to look at it like, and also, by the way, you have to be careful too. When you're interacting with things on the other side, I don't think it's always just yourself. I don't think these guardian angels is always just yourself. And I don't think the demons is always just yourself. I think that they're bad characters. I think there really is a devil character that comes in because the Bible says, the devil tries to pass himself off as an angel of light. So he can
Right.
be very deceiving. So you may get visions or, think you're in communication with the other side or whatever, or having these different spiritual experiences. So be careful. Be careful what you're letting in, because when you consent to anything, when you open that door, just like vampires, you're letting these things in, man, and you have to be very careful at what you let in, because you could, when that door is open, that's why, I think the Bible says something about filling, always having your house filled. That way nothing else could come in. Fill it with Christ. That way nothing else could come into your house, right? Because when you have an empty house, it's just a lot of room for demons and all this other stuff, dude.
Yeah. No, that's interesting though. It's creepy to even consider the fact that you may have positive intentions. I think it starts off with what your initial intentions are, right? I think that's the starter point. I think that energy, good or bad intentions, I think that's what feeds whatever window, whatever doorway that is. But I don't know. I'm not an expert at this, but if I had positive intentions to connect with my higher self, like if I call on the telephone, so to speak, will my higher self answer, or will the something else answer and pretend? That's hard to know. That reminds me, the Mayans, they had a phrase called "in la que a la que," and that actually meant I am a
Shit, my
virgin.
furniture just started floating.
Shut up.
I'm just kidding. So like you casted a spell with that. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, man.
But yeah, they believe that kind of like how you and I talked before. I'm you and you're me, but they believed a little bit of an extension of that was that every single person in their life, from the time they're born to the time that they die, that interacts with them, even the people that just casually walk by and don't say anything to them, everybody there is a version of you. In this case, everybody that has walked by you, everybody that has interacted with you, everybody that's going to interact with you is a version of you, from the most closest similarity version of you to the most farthest away. So you've met people that you're like, man, we have so much in common. We're like freaking brothers. We're like twins and everything, right? That is probably that version of you. If it's Joe Schmo, that is a closer version to you, kind of like a parallel reality. The from the parent reality to the farthest one. And then you have one that you like, man, I hate that guy. That guy's a fucking dick. That is a very far version of you, or somewhere deep or even close. Who knows and everything. So when I first heard that the minds believe that and everything, they even took care of each other because they had that mindset. They believe they're like, I'm taking care of us. I'm taking care of me. Uh, I was like, very interesting. That is a very interesting way of seeing things because it's kind of saying like they are living in their own created reality, and everybody that they interact with is just them. Just a bunch of them looking differently, whatever the case is. But I then asked my question if that's true in that sense, why? Why are there so many versions of the same person and then interacting with it? And I think you like when you look in the mirror, you're checking yourself out. You're like, everything good? Or is everything not good? I think that's what those versions are doing. When you interact with people, when people come into your life, which is another version of you that you need in that moment, in that time frame, you need that version of you. You need that friend that's ride or die with you, or you need that friend that will like keep you in check, whatever. That's a version of you that you created because you need that person. So I think we create the people that we need, and maybe sometimes people that we don't need, but they have their purpose too and everything. And I think that's how we live through our life, and we learn from ourselves. We learn from ourselves. I learned from you. Look at this. This podcast thing was a thought. I ran into you, and look where we're at. I needed you. I needed a version of you, a version of me, whatever the case is, to get me to this point. And then on the road, we may be parallel to each other, but we're going to support each other. And
Yeah.
and how that goes is it will just develop on its own.
Yeah, I've always felt like we were pretty simpatico, I guess you could say. We kind of vibed on the same level even 20 years ago when we first met. Because I don't ever remember being angry at you about anything. So, but yeah, man, you're right though. It's like when you vibe with somebody, it's because you're on the same vibrational or pretty close to the same vibrational level as whoever that person is. It's funny because you always see these stickers and stuff that say good vibes only and all this other stuff, and it's like it just seemed always kind of corny. But now you're like, oh, I get it. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's just when these messages, there's so many messages that go out there, and it's about the delivery, right? And sometimes the message, good vibes, is really what it is, but because it's just you're not ready at that moment for that message and that delivery. It might sound better from somebody else to tell you. And you're like, oh, I heard that before. Okay, now I understand it. Things like that.
But when we have these experiences in life, like I said, man, you shift to a new reality. When something happens to you, when you learn from it, you shift into that different version of you, that different dimension. And when you get to that different dimension, there probably is a Febreze that's only spelled with one E. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There probably is. There's like little changes, like the butterfly effect, right? That little changes in that reality that you you have no control over, but you notice it. And I think those are little markers for us to just to remember that there
Yeah.
are different versions of ourselves and not to go backwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you heard of Endinkra codes?
No, what was that?
Endinkra codes. So there's a professor. I think his name's James Sylvester. Sylvester James. Anyways, he's a professor in quantum physics at the University of, I think it's Maryland or Massachusetts. One of those. I'll get that information squared away. But the point is that he has been studying for like over 45 years. There's this code, and I may butcher this name. It's called the Mandelbrot code or something like that. And this code is the formula for everything, for the ether, for everything for how the world creates and builds itself. Anyways, he's been studying this code for so many years that at one point in his research, he broke down that code even smaller, and he found that there were these Endinkran codes, and he called them Endinkran codes because they look like, when you go to the font in like Word, and you can change the letters to like shapes or like weird looking symbols. Those are like Endinkran codes, okay? And there was a tribe, the Dogon tribe, and they actually wear these Indinkra artwork on their clothes and everything that they do and everything. So that's why he named it Indinkra codes, because there were these symbols that just didn't make sense. It's not like a square, nothing like that. They're just like little shapes and everything. But anyways, he found out that these Indinkra codes are the same codes that are used in your web browsers and internet searches. They were called error correcting codes. So when you send an email and there's like a string of binary code that gets sent with whatever it is that you wrote, and then there's these error codes, an extra layer of codes that goes out. So that way to make sure that your actual content of the email makes it to the other side. And he says that, wow, it looks like the ether of space, time, everything, has these error correcting codes. And I think that goes back to this initial conversation of the Mandela effect. I think there's been a crack somewhere, and life is trying to correct, at least this realm is trying to correct itself with these, ongoing Indinkra codes. And this is why we're getting some of these corrections. And some of us are remembering it, some of us are not, things like that. But let me add one more thing to that comment, that same small code, Pixar used that code, and they, when they broke off from Disney and they started their own company, right? Pixar ended up putting that code into their software, and to this day, this is why their animation looks so real. And what this code does, because it's the creation of life code and everything, what it does is it creates every frame as needed. So it creates the backgrounds, the trees, the character, the smile, and this is why these animations, particularly from Pixar, are so realistic, because they're not drawing and they're not creating these characters or these storylines. This code has been for a few years now, since Pixar started, has been creating all of these, this world. That is very interesting.
That's super interesting, dude.
Yeah.
That's wild, man. I didn't know that, and that actually kind of makes sense with what's going on with. Like, I always think about that too. Like, what if we keep talking about video games, and because that's kind of what it is looking like. We're in some sort of simulation, right? And everybody kind of is starting to agree that, at the when you split atoms open and stuff, you can start seeing ones and zeros, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And what's funny is, like, maybe it's like when we die, when you die in a video game, you respawn, and you keep dying over and over, and you keep respawning over and over, and you're like, eventually you're like, well, I'm not going to go that way this time. I'm going to go this other route and see what happens. Yeah. Because, I mean, if you keep trying that same way, you're going to keep ending up at the same place. You're going to keep respawning back to that same spot. So, yeah, that's interesting about that code. I didn't know that's what that was called, the Indinkra code. I have to look that up.
And just make sure that to tell you the right information, his name is Sylvester James Gates, and he's a physicist at the University of Maryland, and he got books up the wazoo, and he's 73 years old, and African American as well. But yeah, he discovered these codes, and they have these like scientific panels where all the great minds gather once a year, and they have these panels and they talk to their peers, other physicists and things like that. And a few years back, I think, well, I say probably like in 6, okay, so it's more than a few years, but he went ahead and was on a panel. I think there were like 5 of them, and Tyson, what's his name? Tyson, whatever, the quantum physics guy, the Tyson guy, anyways, Degrassi, whatever. Yeah, he was the host of this panel. And this is the first time in front of everybody when Sylvester James mentioned, because they're going down the panel and they're like, hey, what are you working on? And then he's like, well, something kind of interesting. And then he says, I think I have found the proof that we are in a simulation. Everybody's like, okay, but he's on the panel, so he's not in the audience. So he's a very well-respected man, and he went through this whole speech and explained it better than I could. And Tyson Degrassi was like, hold up, we can't even not move any further in this convention without processing what you just told us.
Yeah, I saw that
You're
clip.
telling me that.
Yeah, I did see that clip. I I know exactly what you're talking about because of that reaction. Well, what's funny is like when you are open to listening to the universe, you can kind of sense when things are off, when people are off. You can now you can almost see the auras in a way without seeing the auras. Like I can immediately look at somebody and say that's a good person or not. You know,
Right,
I can
right.
sense the energy about it.
Isn't that awesome that we're at that level?
Yeah, I mean
That
it's a
we're perceiving, like, you compare yourself now to like 20 years ago when you made that same comment. You're like, I could tell who's cool and who's not. You could tell there's a difference. Like, you now, 20 years later, you really understand what you mean when you say that.
yeah. What's funny is when you raise your vibrations, because what vibrations do is they create heat. So when
Mhm.
you raise your vibrations, you're shining a little bit more light than others. Okay. And so people have a hard time processing that. So when you get around people, it's hard to make friends when what I call a star seed or just an enlightened person more than anything.
I like Star.
Yeah. It's just an enlightened person. That's all it is. And for me, when you vibrate at a higher level, you emanate more light and more love. And so when you're around people who don't understand that, they don't like you. Like they
Mm.
don't understand it. They don't understand you. They don't understand how you could, people don't understand how I can be on TV shows, or people don't understand how I could work for people I've worked for, or go on the places I've gone, or do podcasts and be on these big shows and all these other things. People don't understand that because
Yeah.
they're stuck at a level that they go to work every day. And I know there are people who are listening to this show right now that go to work every day, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm just telling you that everybody who goes to work knows that they shouldn't be there. Like everybody has a different version of themselves that they want to be, but they're not living it. And so
Yeah.
I'm not telling people anything new, but
Mm.
some people have that way about them where you just don't understand the energy. It's so much more charisma and light and love and energy that people are afraid of that. I'll tell you a story real quick, man. When I was the last place I was working at, I used to go to work every day, and we had prayer group. This was after I got out of the military. I was working for an organization, nonprofit, and we would have prayer group in the mornings. And I would go to prayer group, not all the time, but sometimes. And anytime somebody was sick, I'd send them flowers to the hospital, right? I'd bring donuts to the office. There was a guy at work who needed uniforms. We had like polo shirts with logos on them and stuff, and he couldn't afford them. He had a bunch of kids and stuff, bought him a bunch of uniforms. So I did stuff all the time. And whenever I'd go around, when I'd walk around, people would be like, "Oh my God, Brad," and they'd hug me, and they would light up. A lot of people would. But the people who were threatened by that, the people who didn't understand that kind of light, that kind of energy, will try to keep me down in life because it was something that they were afraid of. They knew that I could take their jobs because I knew more about my job than they did. And so they would write bad reviews, and they would tell HR just lies about me and stuff like that. But again, it's almost always, and there's been interviews. I've gone on 4-hour interviews before for marketing and web design, which I know about more than anybody. I'm way more qualified than anybody that they would have ever interviewed. The
Mm.
places I've been, the things I've done, degrees I have, that kind of stuff, but for some reason didn't get the job. And again, I think it was because my light, the light that I emanated, the charisma, it threatened people. I'm not saying I'm charming or anything like that. I'm just telling you that for me, someone who has extra light is more of a charismatic type of person. I'm not saying I'm charismatic, but I'm just telling you that. But for me, man, it's like you get used to the idea that people on this journey, they're not going to support you, because when you get to the top, when you rise to those different higher levels, it's a lonely place. There's nobody else vibing with you because everybody's stuck at their levels.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be walking beside someone who is on a much lower level than you, and they just don't understand how you can have things in life, how you can have a beautiful wife and a beautiful family and nice house and nice car, and they hate that. They hate you for it because you somehow caused their problems, and
Right.
that's not the case. So it's a lonely place when you start to wake up and realize your true potential in life, that you're a creator, that you have this God-given ability to create, and that you are a light being, and right now your light might be dimmer than what it should be. And there's ways to get to that point where your light is shining brighter. So I think it's important for people to know that. It's important to know that it's not going to be an easy road, even when you have everything you want in life. That's why when celebrities have, they get addicted to drugs or whatever, because they get there and it's such a lonely place that nobody think about that. How many people can relate to Brad Pitt, right? Or the celebrity of whoever,
Yeah.
you name you. How many people can say they can relate to that person? So if you can't relate to that person, if Brad Pitt doesn't have anybody to relate to vibe with, it can become a sad and lonely world. How can you continue to progress through the levels if it's just you? Like you know what I mean? It's so yeah, man. I think it's important to note that it's a lonely place. You're gonna feel like you have no friends. You're gonna feel like you're alone. Nobody gets you when you're at the dinner table talking about this stuff with people. When you're talking about the Anunnaki or
Yeah.
the Indinka codes or whatever, they're gonna be like, oh, it would go again. Caesar's talking.
Yo,
He's spinning that booty chatter again.
go talk to a wall.
Yeah, yeah.
You mentioned about being a lonely place when you get to that top. Well, as you were saying that, I was thinking, what if, again, source, right? What if the source who's omnipotent, right? There's only one. What if what if it feels the same way? It's lonely.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is lonely. And it's like, I need to, like, what's going on out there, So it's, again, as we talked about, it divided itself. And it's just learning what's out there, what's going on, like, who am I, what am I, like, whatever questions, the who, what, why, where, and how, and it's out there. And for eons it's been collecting that information, still to this day, to this second, still trying to figure out what is it. Can you imagine if you were it, and then still trying to, after eons, still trying to figure out what are you? And then again, if we're looking at the macro versus the micro, and we're the micro, we ask ourselves the same thing that it is asking itself. So we're actually an echo of what it's wanting. We're trying to figure out ourselves, and through discovering ourselves, which people don't, even through a lifetime, they still don't figure it out. But for those that kind of do, or find their purpose or their meaning, or whatever you want to call it, through that little bit of minuscule data that gets back to the source when our avatar passes away, it's one more step closer to hopefully figuring out that answer.
Yeah, man, it's beautiful. That's a good way to put it, because it's like that's pretty much it. And it's like our journeys, in life, the end result is not about the what you're trying to achieve in life. It's about the journey itself. I mean, you've heard these sayings all along, right? It's like, trying to get to, the Tower of Babel. They were all trying to get to heaven, right? It's like, and then God knocked them all down, and he's like, hey, you can't cheat. You can't,
Yeah.
you gotta go through the levels. You can't just
Level through this shit.
Yeah, you gotta go through the levels of it. But yeah, man, I mean, I think even when you got people like these Buddhist monks and all these people, that's why they sit in isolation, because they have nobody to vibe with, man. Nobody can even relate to that when you can separate your soul from your body and experience the universe all at once, and all these, and you could travel on the etheric highway or whatever you want to do, the Akashic record. You can flow through the Akashic record. Like, those are lonely places that normal people can't access. So how can you have a conversation with someone? I used to work for a guy, I'll just say, that I traveled around the world, and I can't just tell those stories to people, because people listening to this show they can't relate to it. So if I tell anything, like if I say any of those stories, which are wild and crazy stories, right? Things I've played, things I've done, people I've seen, people I've met, like, people would just gloss over it and be like, it just sounds like he's bragging, or it just sounds like a lie. So
Right.
it's our own individual journey. Again, it's not the end result of trying to get rich. It's the process along the way that really teaches you what heaven is really all about, and heaven is within. You know what I mean? You don't, to access that best version of yourself, you just look inward through meditation or whatever the case is. So
Absolutely. I like that comment. I'm gonna say one thing and then we'll wrap this up. But to what you just said, everybody's so worried about looking outside for somebody to save them. How can they help me? What are they gonna do for me? Like, you go to, now this is not a bash against religion, it's making an observation here, but you go to church and they're teaching you to pray and just hope that you'll be saved. But in reality, you should be saving yourself. You should be, the God that you should be looking towards should be inside. It's my opinion. The whole point of that comment is just the fact that you have all the answers that you need, but you have to take a moment. You have to really take a moment and look inside, like you said, Brad. Look inside, ask your inner self the question. Just take a moment, just be quiet and listen. They say go to this place and pray and then just wait. And everybody's literally just waiting, like, okay, can you give me a sign? No, stop looking up. We've been doing that since the ancient days where everybody worshiped Amun Ra, the sun god, this and that, blah, blah, blah. I think some of us may know that's where we got the phrase Amen from Amun Ra. He was a jealous guy, which, if that sounds familiar, that was translated back into the Bible. They're saying Jesus had said that, but it was actually Amun Ra that said that. And he says, when you pray to the sun god, which is me, at the end of your prayers, you will say Amen. That's my name, but we've been saying Amen for all these years, and no one really questions it because the story of Amen has been retold, so the narrative can be like, just say it. It's how you put a stamp and will blow a kiss on the letter. It'll go,
Well, regardless of the deity that you look towards, you said it best when it's within. Heaven is head, Heahead, Heaven, and hell is your heel, right? So it's like heaven is, our body is heaven. Like, we can access the ups and downs of the world by going within, by going without. We can do everything spiritually. We can see into the dark with our third eye, and we can see into the light with our two eyes, and that God gave us to see the visible light. So
love it. I love it. Brad, we are going to do this again. Overall, man, thanks for making this time available to talk to me. And we were just going to go pick a topic. We started off, for those of you that remember, Mandela Effect, and we just kind of went off. But that's the beauty of these conversations. It goes where it wants to go, we're just avatars to this conversation. See, the energy was the conversation itself. That cymatic frequency was on fire. And we were just going with it wherever we needed to go. We have now stuck the landing. We'll wrap this up here for now. Brad, the next time that I have you on, I want to talk to you about what you're knowledgeable, the 33rd parallel, right?
Yeah.
And give us a little preview of the 33rd parallel, so folks who know like what they can expect on round 2 of this conversation.
Well, so 33rd parallels, quickly speaking, it's a ley line, it's an energy line, we're in an energy grid. Like we've been talking, this kind of ties into the conversation today. We're talking about an energy grid, and if you zoom out, we're in a circuit board, and I look at the 33rd parallel as like the main circuit board of the holographic reality that we live in, right? So a lot of high strangeness on that line, a lot of weird, things like Bermuda Triangle and different assassinations and Roswell and all these other things. I'm into a lot of paranormal stuff because conspiracy usually leads to spirituality, or conspiracy usually leads to paranormal. Paranormal usually leads to spirituality. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. Is along the way, I've learned a lot of different things about conspiracy and paranormal and what's really happening, and what's, the hidden history, the hidden truth of the world that we live in. We have overseers in this world who are keeping this knowledge away from us, who are keeping us away from higher versions of ourselves, and they're sort of keeping us trapped at these in trauma and fear at these different levels, and they're using the energy grid, such as the 33rd parallel, to sort of keep us trapped like Ghostbusters, right? They have the little traps they send out when they capture the ghost. That's kind of what that is, right? So best analogy I could give. Yeah. But which I'm working on one right now. So stay tuned for that. It's actually kind of shifted. I started off as doing like a 33rd parallel documentary, but the longer I think about it, the more I explore, and I might start doing like a series on it that I'll release on my website, which you can find at theawakenedpodcast.com again. And if you want to follow me, man, follow me on Spotify. That seems to be the fastest growing place to follow me. But yeah, all this stuff will be on on my website eventually, and I'll hopefully I could monetize it a little bit, because this stuff ain't cheap, it ain't free, right? So I mean, just to get this information out there, it takes a lot of time and effort and money. So I might monetize it $3 an episode or something like that. You know what I mean? And but I want to share this knowledge with the world, that there was a civilization that existed that was way more advanced than our current civilization. Everybody thinks that we're in the most technologically advanced civilization of all time, but that's clearly not the case if you look at history, like the pyramids and things like that. So yeah, it's interesting, man, and I want to kind of uncover that stuff along the way.
I'm down, man. I'm here for that. So again, Brad Lail from the Awaken podcast. Again, thanks for joining my podcast, Beyond the Frequency, where we continue to ask that question: what is beyond the frequency?